going to end up seeing all of the answers. And honestly, 3.5 and 3.6 are the two that we did the most recently. And so they're probably the ones that you all need the most work on because we haven't done them as long. The other lessons are lessons that we've done for a long time. And so I'm hoping you all did better with those than maybe you did here. So we're just going to start on this last page, and then we'll work our way forward with the others. So let me get that bigger. Okay, so on this first one, it's a solving markup and markdown problems. Now, in order to do that, you have to know this equation where M equals the percent times the cost. After you solve the equation, you're either going to add or subtract. To find the answer, depending on if it's a markup or a markdown. So in number 1, it says Hank buys a used car for $7,200 and plans to sell it at his used car lot. What is the price of the car after a markup of 15%? So this is relatively straightforward. You just use M equals percent times the cost. But make sure that when you have the percent in an equation, you have to divide by 100 to make it a decimal. So instead of 15, it's actually going to be 0.15. And you're going to multiply that by 7,200. So what would that be if you multiply 0.15 times 7,200? Well, y'all should have this wrote down. Everyone had it done. What's 0.15 times 7,200? 1,080. So this is not the cost of the car. We cannot stop there. It's wanting to know what's the cost after the markup. So if it's a markup, am I going to add or subtract? Macy, what am I going to do? I'm going to add. So you add the 7,200 to it, which would give you 8,280 as your final answer. So with these types of problems, don't stop when you get that. It's like that mugshot that we did. So sometimes you stopped if it was asking for the amount of tax or how much money you saved. But other times, if it was asking for the total, you had to keep going and you had to add or subtract. So number 2, this is one of those harder ones because there's 2 steps to it. Or actually, there's like 4 steps to it. So it says Naya wants to buy a sweater that had an original price of $55. The sweater is now discounted 20% and it has a tax rate of 5.5. How much will she pay for the sweater? So since I have 2 different percents, that means I'm going to have 2 different equations. So I'm going to have M equals percent times cost and M equals percent times cost. Before I deal with the second percent, though, I have to deal with the first percent. So my percent is 20%, so that's 0.2 times 55, because that's my cost. What is 0.2 times 55? Diego? 11. So that's being discounted by 11. If it's a discount, do I add or subtract, Olivia? I subtract a discount, so it would be 55 minus 11. Rowan, did you have a question? Or sorry, Rylan, did you have a question? Or okay. So this gets it down to $44. I have this second percent though, so I am not done. I take this new percent, so this is 0.055, and I'm going to multiply it by the new cost of 44. So you have to have your new cost in order to do your next equation. So what is 0.055 times 44? What would that be, Oakley? 2.42. Now I go back and look at it. This is my tax rate. So is tax being added or subtracted? Do you add or subtract tax, Macy? You add tax. So I'm going to take my 44 and I'm going to add my 242 to get 46.42 as my final answer. Okay, so both of these, you're just multiplying the percent times the cost. But you have to pay attention if you're supposed to add or subtract. Okay, on your test, you will get some points if you get to the M, but you won't get all the points because you didn't add or subtract. So make sure, that was the biggest thing that happened on the test last time, is that you all would not read the question to figure out what it is asking. It's not asking for how much money they saved, it's asking for the total. So that's when you have to add or subtract. Any questions on markup and markdown? Okay. Numbers, this is the last one. This is probably the newest thing. Well, it is the newest thing we did because we took notes over it on Monday and you all did your assignment on Tuesday and we haven't done it since other than in the study guide. Well, actually on Wednesday, those pages that I accidentally had you do, that was over this as well. So you did get some practice. But this is the equation. This is a simple interest equation. So I equals PRT. Remember, the initial amount or the principal is always going to be money. The rate is always going to be a percent. Your time is going to be in years, and your interest is also going to be money. So that will help you decide which one goes where. So in number one, Ethan put $700 into a certificate of deposit account that earns 1.8% interest. What will the interest of the CD be after 6 years? So remember, always start by writing your equation. I equals PRT. And then just plug in your numbers. So what is the 700? The 700 is the principal because that's what we start with. What about the 1.8? Would the 1.8 be the interest, the rate, or the time, Jake? The percent, which one is percent? Which one's the percent? You have money, percent, years, money. The 1.8 is the percent, but where does it go down here? Does it go with interest, rate, or time? It goes with the rate. Now remember, just like every other time, you have to divide it by 100 to make it into a decimal. So this would really be 0.018 as my rate. And then finally, where does my 6 go, Miguel? It's the time. Now, when I have all of these numbers side by side like this, how do I solve that? Cameron, how do I solve it? Do I add, subtract, multiply, or divide these numbers? I just multiply them straight across. And so 700 times 0.018 times 6. What would it be, Rylan? 75.6. And if I go back and read my question, what will the interest be of the CD account? Well, it says my interest is 75.6. So that's my answer. So on these, like I said, we didn't get a ton of practice with them. I think your bell work, that the second one was a lot like this, but it really is just as simple as putting it where it goes in the equation. On number 2, it says Kelly opened a bank account that earns 1.2% simple interest each year. After 7 years, Kelly earns $126 in interest. How much did she deposit when she opened the account? So I'm going to start with I equals PRT. Where does the 1.2 go? With the interest, principal, rate, or time? Shelby, where did the 1.2 go?
Rate.
It's the rate. Now remember, you have to divide it by 100, so it's 0.012. What about the 7? Jordan, is the 7 the interest, the principal, or the time? The time, because it's in years. And then what about $126? Is it interest or is it principal? Rowan, what would the $126 be? Well, what does it say? $126 in interest. So this would actually go with interest because it tells us that that's interest. That means P would be the Lone Ranger off by itself. To solve this, you multiply what you can. So 0.012 times 7. And what would that give you? Rylan?
0.084.
And I just write down my P to go with it. Bring down everything else. How do I solve this? McKenna, how would I solve this to get the P by itself? I'm not going to divide by 100. What could I divide by to get this by itself? What's with it? What am I trying to get rid of? I'm not trying to get rid of the P. I want to keep the P. What do I want to get rid of? I want to get rid of the decimal. So you have to divide by the decimal. So I'm going to divide by 0.084 on both sides. So that tells me P equals how much? What's 126 divided by 0.084? 126 divided by 0.084. Jordan? That's my answer. So on both of these, you have to remember the equation, I equals PRT. It's behind Rowan on that green poster in case you ever forget it, I equals PRT. And then you're just plugging in the numbers. You have to know rate is always your percent, time is your years, principal and interest are both money, but a lot of times it'll tell you either they get this much interest or they start out with this much money to help you differentiate. And plus, I'm always here so you can ask questions. Any questions about either one of these two? Like I said, this was the newest thing that we did. So I don't want you all to just kind of look over it and not, or glance over it and not understand it. Are we okay with this? Okay. So go on backwards to percent change and percent error. So 3-4 on the previous page. We did this one. We started with this equation, the difference equals the percent times the actual, but we learned pretty quick that all you have to do is subtract the two numbers and then you divide by the original number. And that gives you your answer. But remember, with percent, you have to multiply by 100 to get your final answer. So in 2014, the attendance at the Fall Festival was 650. In 2015, the attendance was 575. What was the change in attendance from 14 to 15 and rounded to the nearest whole percent? So we're going to start by subtracting. And then I have to divide my old amount or my original amount. which amount was my original? Was it 650 or was it 575? Rylan? 650. So if I subtract, that gives me 75 over 650, and then you're going to divide. What is 75 divided by 650? It's going to be a long decimal. Just give me the first 3 digits after the decimal. So 75 divided by 650. Miguel, what did you get? 0. What? No, it should have been a whole lot more decimals than just 9. See, I knew it. So give me the first 3 numbers. 0.993. One more. So did you do 75 divided by 650? Okay. That sounds weird to me for some reason. Is that right, guys? Yeah, it should be a different. I don't know what you did, Miguel. Maybe you did 7 or 700. I don't know. So try again. 75 divided by 650. Diego, what did you get? 0.115. And a whole bunch of numbers. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why, Miguel, yours did a little bit different. Maybe you did 75 divided by 65 or something. But always, it's all, when you are using calculators, they don't make mistakes. Did you fix it? Did you figure it out? Okay. So calculators don't make mistakes, but it is really easy to accidentally put in the wrong one. So when I'm solving something on a calculator, I always do it twice or go back and look and double check that I put in the right answers. So it's 0.115. We know we have to multiply it by 100 to change it to a percent, which is 11.5. If this was your final answer, you would get most of your points on your test, but you wouldn't get all of them because it says to round to the nearest whole. What would the nearest whole be? Would it be 11 or 12, Shelby? It would be 12. So 12 would get you all of your points on your test. 11.5 would get you most. Number 2, it says Melissa estimated that she would read 250 pages, and she actually read 290 pages. What is the percent error on Melissa's estimate, and round it to the nearest whole? So we're going to do the same thing. So 290 minus 250, which would be 40. And then what actually happened? How many pages did she actually read, Oakley? How many pages did she actually read? 290. So that is what you divide by. So 40 divided by 290 is going to be another big long decimal. What do you get when you do 40 divided by 290? Jordan? 0.137. And a whole bunch of numbers. So remember, you have to multiply that by 100, which would be 13.7. You get most of your points here, but it asks for you to round to the nearest whole. So would 13.7 round to 13 or 14, McKenna? It would round up to 14%. So how do you feel about percent error and stuff? So what I want to do, so 3-3, 3-1, 2, and 3, you all can solve it the same exact way. So what I want to do is just go back to the first page. So, just the essential vocab. So there's 4 things that you need to know. If you study nothing else, you need to study this. So the first thing you have to know is the percent proportion, because that is how you solve the equations from 3-1, 3-2, and 3-3. So your percent proportion is percent over 100 equals is over of. You have to, this is probably half your test right here. You have to know what these are. The next one you need to know is your markup. So your markup, that equals your percent times the cost. We've already talked about that. That was in like 3-4, I think. 3-4, or I think it was 3-5. Just remember, when you have your percent, you have to divide by 100 to make it into a decimal. The third thing you absolutely have to know is your interest. So I equals PRT. Your interest and principal is going to be money. Your rate will be percent, and your time will be in years. And the last thing is what we just did, where it's percent change, and you do new percent change and error. You do new minus old, and you divide by old as well. So these 4 things, if you do not study anything else, you have to know these 4 equations. 3 of them are on the back wall. The percent, the interest, and the percent change are all on the red and green posters in the back of the room. The only one that isn't listed is this markup or markdown one. That's really all you do. Well, sorry, I missed one. So you have to do percent times cost, and then you decide if you add or subtract. Okay? So those are the 4 main things you have to make sure you do. Everyone needs this wrote down, because I'm telling you, these are the 4 things. This class did really good with getting your study guide done or working on it, but we have to write down the extra things that I give you all just to help you. Now I want to look at the vocab review. This was mostly just to know if you know what things are called. So number 1 says the blank is the decrease from the original price to its sales price. What would that be? What is the decrease called from the original price to the sales price? Marked down. Increase is mark up, but decrease is marked down. Now this second one, honestly, the answer wasn't listed, so I don't really like that. But the second one, the accuracy of a measured or estimated value to its actual value, is percent error. That one wasn't listed for whatever reason. But the percent error compares something from the estimation to the actual. Number 3, an initial amount of money that is deposited in an account is called what? The principal. It's not the interest. The interest is what you get after, but the principal is what you start off with. And lastly, the blank describes how much a quantity has changed relative to the original amount. What would that be, Rylan?
Percent change.
This is percent change. I don't ask you a bunch of vocab questions on your test. It's mostly just so if you know what they mean, then hopefully it'll help you remember the equations at the top. Any questions on the vocab? Okay, look back. Rowan, I just got an email saying that you submitted something late, but you don't have a computer. So I don't know what happened. Maybe it was in another class. Did you send in something to me in the last class? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's a ghost. So look back at 3-1. So 3-1, 3-2, and 3-3, you can all solve them the exact same way. They can all be solved using percent over 100 equals is over of. So if you set them up like this, you will get the final answer in all of them. And the good thing about doing this is you don't have to change anything. You don't have to multiply or divide by 100. It just gives you the answer. So on number 1, we have our percent 0.8 over 100. Where would 1,046 go? Would it go on the top or the bottom, Miguel? Where would 1,046 go? Go on the bottom because it's of 1,046. And then you just do the butterfly method. This becomes 100x. And what is 0.8 times 1,046, Rylan? What is it? 8,368. And then how do I solve it? I divide. So x would be, let's see, 0.8. Okay, so Rylan, this should actually be 836.8. Chances are you just did 8 times 1,000, but it's supposed to be 0.8 times 1,000. I did. I'm just saying it's not right. So it's 836. So when you divide it by 100, it becomes 8.368. You had the right numbers, your decimal just wasn't in the right place, which tells me that you probably didn't put the decimal in the right place initially. On this next one, you set it up the exact same way. 160 goes on the top of 100. Where does 98 go? Would 98 go on the top or bottom, Sadie? It's of 98. So where does 98 go? The bottom. That means x goes on top, and you cross multiply, giving you 100x is equal to what? What is 160 times 98? Macy, what is it? It's going to be a big number. 160 times 98. 15680. So 15,680. Divide by 100 because that's what's with the x. So x would equal 156.8 as your final answer. So like I said, we practiced this a lot. We had a lot of problems where we had to solve problems like this. This should not be new. What could be new, though, is doing it with word problems. But word problems, you can set up the exact same way. So we have 4.5%, and we have what is the feed, an item that costs $56. So my percent goes on top of 100. Where does my 56 go? If the item costs $56, is that part of the price or the whole price, Diego? Would $56 be part of the price or the whole price? Well, if the item costs that much,
The whole.
if the item costs that much, it has to be the whole price. And so that means X would be the part. You would cross multiply and get 100X. What's 4.5 times 56, Rylan? 252. Is there another number? No, that's right. And then you divide by 100. So X would be 2.52. That's why I like these proportions, because you don't have to change anything. It just gives you the answer. When you use an equation, like the markup or the percent error, you have to change it to decimals and do all that. But proportions are just straightforward. Here's the answer. This is it. On the next three, again, you can do it the same way. The only difference is that instead of saying is over of, they called it part over whole. But it's all the same.